Well, we're starting a new series called Relational Rehab, and I thought it'd be fun to just watch this video to prime our hearts for this topic.
Choreography myself. Hey honey, have you gained some weight in your rear end? The dress you wear reminds me of my old girlfriend. And where'd you get those shoes? I think they're pretty lame. Would you stop talking, cause I'm trying to watch the game? If you're a man who wants to live a long and happy life, these are the things you don't say to your wife. I planned a hunting trip next week on your birthday. I didn't ask you, but I knew it'd be okay. Go make some dinner while I watch this fishing show. I taped it over our wedding video. If you're a man who done that, a long and happy life, it's all the solo. Okay. Your cooking is okay, but not like mother makes. The diamond in the ring I bought you is a fake. Your eyes look puffy, dear. Are you feeling ill? Happy anniversary, I bought you a treadmill. You're a man who wants to live a long and happy love that too. It's all the things you don't say. You're a man who doesn't want to get killed with a knife. These are the things you don't say.
If you've said those things to your wife and you're still alive, your wife is a saint. And you're in the right place. Today we're talking about we're starting a series called Relationship Rehab, and we're going to look over the next 4 weeks, how can we come alongside different relationships in our lives to make them healthier? Our marriages, our dating relationships, our relationships with our children, work relationships, and we're also going to talk about toxic relationships as well in the next couple weeks. So, would invite you to come back throughout the remaining of this series. Now, look, I know that not everyone is called to be married. Not everyone is called to be married, and so singleness, friends, is a gift from God. It's a gift. It might be just you have singleness for a time in your life right now, and that's God's gift to you. Maybe you'll end up being married, or maybe you'll never be married. It doesn't make you less of a person, less of a Christ follower if not be married. But marriage is a gift as well, and we should treasure that gift. And so, even though we're talking about marriage, I believe there are certain principles we'll be talking about this morning that you can transport or transplant into different relationships in your life. So I hope you'll stay connected, even if you're not married or not dating right now. I hope you'll stay connected and think about how you can apply some of these principles into other areas of your life. Now, when it comes to love, it almost never happens like we think it will, does it? I mean, when you're growing up and you watch movies and you see Disney animation and you think, okay, this is what happens. You know, you meet the one true love of your life, you get engaged and married all on the same day. Then you live happily ever after, right? But that's not reality. That's not reality. That's part of the truth. But the reality is that life is hard. And a marriage is oftentimes takes work. And it takes effort. And it takes us more than once in our married lives putting it in rehab to have some evaluative stuff done, to deal with some issues that have come up. Relationships do not develop smoothly. There's something in us, in you and I, that resists change and development. And we want wives or husbands, friends, companions to be the same tomorrow as they are today. And at the same time, there's something in us that wants to know more about the other and is bored with sameness. So basically, this is saying we're all schizophrenic, right? We don't want things to change, and we do because we're bored. But we are all changing. Every one of us is changing. And I thank God that I am a different person today than I was 14 years ago when I was on staff here. Some of you met me for the first time. I am a different person. I've changed. And we are all changing. That's why we need to take moments in our relationships to stop and consider what do we need to talk about? What do we need to address? What do we need to rediscover about our spouse or the person we're dating or our children? Jada and I have put our relationship in rehab frequently, as often as once a day. Well, I mean, whenever we need to, we just say, okay, we need to sit down, carve out some time, kick the kids out in the rain, and have a conversation. We need to take seriously what's going on in our lives today. Listen to what it says in Ephesians chapter 4. In your anger, do not sin. Do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. I've always been confused because most of our fights start at about midnight. And the sun's already down. So what do we do with that? That's not what this is saying, right? This is saying, look, as soon as the issue comes up, deal with it right away. That's the point. When the issue comes up, deal with it right away. The best way to deal with it, if it's midnight, might possibly lead you to go to sleep and then get up and deal with it. Because oftentimes in our sleep deprivation, we say things we don't mean, and we don't hear what the other person is saying quite clearly. This is saying don't sweep it under the rug. Some of us here today, we've been sweeping issues under the rug in regards to our relationships for a long time. And let me tell you, friends, our attempt to avoid hard conversations or conflict is slowly destroying our relationships. It's slowly destroying our relationships. Unresolved, unconfronted issues slowly eat away at your relationships like a cancer. Avoiding hard subjects, avoiding hard conversations is common practice to unhealthy relationships, friends. Avoiding hard conversation is a practice of an unhealthy relationship. Along with talking negatively about the other person, right? Especially publicly. No more of this putting things on Facebook about how mad you are at your spouse or mother-in-law, right? And these things are going to kill you, right? Once you put it out there, it'll never, ever come back. Jade and I have been married for 15 years this May, and I know compared to some of you, that's just a drop in the hat. Some people in our church have been married as long as 64 years. Someone else was telling me 50-some years. That is amazing, especially in our culture and our day and age. And when I talk about what should we be weird about as a church, we should be weird about having long marriages, right? That should be something we as a church want to be different from the culture in. Long, healthy, thriving marriages. So we've been married 15 years. And over these 15 years, we've over time incorporated some practices that have helped us remain healthy, or continue to foster health in our marriage. And some of them we've got to come back to and go, oh yeah, this is one of our values. And so let's go to work at it. So I'm going to share 7 of these with you. You can write them down. You probably won't remember all of them. You probably won't like or agree with all of them either. That's okay. So write down what sticks with you. Number 1, we have practiced what we call mutual submission. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 21, it says this: submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Paul is talking about, this is how he starts off a conversation about men and women married together. This is the first thing, the most important thing he says. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. The word submit in the original Greek literally means to arrange yourself under, to subordinate. In this word, there is no thought of hierarchy. Subordinate means to be the lesser, to be the supporter. So in your relationship, submit to one another out of reverence of Christ. Choose to be the servant of all to your spouse. Another way that the Greek would also translate this is to yield to one's admonition or advice. Now let's jump to Galatians chapter 5, verse 13. It says this: you, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free. But don't use your freedom to indulge in the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. This word serve literally means be a slave. Be the servant of all. Be a slave to one another. One of the ways that Jada and I submit to each other is by deferring to the other's strength. There are subjects and areas in our lives that Jada is way smarter than I would ever hope to be. And there's probably one area that I'm smarter than her. But it's in her areas of expertise. I defer to her strength, and I trust her. I trust her, and she trusts me, that we will make the best decision for the family in our areas of strength. Here's the key. We know each other's strengths, and we trust each other deeply. See, this doesn't work if you don't trust each other. This doesn't work if you have somehow lost your spouse's trust because of behavior or practices or whatever. It only works if we know each other and we trust each other. Trust is easily lost, friends, and we should guard it well. And it takes a long time to earn trust back. Now, in Ephesians 5:30, Paul is talking about the marriage couple, and he says this: remember, you are members of his body, male and female, man and wife. You are members of Christ's body. And then in 1 Corinthians 12:7, he says, now to each one of the members of Christ's body, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. The manifestation of the Spirit is given to every believer, those who are married to each other as well. So wisdom and knowledge and insight, gifts of healing, however the Spirit decides to distribute the gifts, are given, male and female. And they're for the common good of the body. And if it's for the common good of the body, it should certainly be for the common good of the marriage. God has given your spouse certain gifts that when we, as members of God's body, use the gifts He's given us in redeemed ways, bring life and benefit to our families. Listen, friends, letting other people in your family thrive the gifts that God has given them will cause your family to thrive. Number 2, we maintain a long-term commitment to each other. Maintain a long-term commitment. We've been married 15 years, and our goal is to die being married. That we would have longevity in our marriage. That we're on the 65-year plan, like the Rodmans. Man, we're pushing that way. That's where our sight is set on. Ephesians 5:31 says this: For this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. What does one flesh mean? Well, it doesn't mean that one of the two people loses themselves. It does not mean that. But that the two become one new person, their strengths combined. And to be united literally means that we glue ourselves together. We glue ourselves together. We're in it for the long haul. What happens when you rip something glued together apart? You don't get two whole parts anymore. We're in it for the long haul. We're glued together. Listen, friends, love must be given the opportunity to mature. Love must be given the opportunity to mature. And so often we give up too quickly on our marriages. We give up too quickly on our other relationships as well. Love develops over longevity. It grows deep over time. When I think that, we're all broken people. Jada and I were broken. We brought brokenness into our marriage. We try to hide it for a while. I mean, you can hide brokenness from people outside of your marriage. But eventually, the person you live with knows and sees all of your trash. And it's over time that you get to experience, we've experienced in our relationship, this deep love, despite knowing all there is to know about me. Jada loves me. And the security and the trust that grows out of that. That only happens over time. Over a lifetime of committedness together. Number 3, we work at and we work towards good and open communication. What do good communicators do? Number 1, they listen intently. They listen. They listen not just with their ears, but with their eyes. They look at the other person and they look for hesitation. They watch the body language. They pay attention to what's happening inside of themselves and what's happening in the other person, especially as they process difficult issues and topics. This is so important. Listen intently. Listen with your eyes. And they respond wisely. Good communicators respond wisely. James chapter 3, verse 16 says this, "For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice." Friends, when we respond out of envy, out of our selfish ambitions, out of ourselves first, not submitting to each other, not coming underneath to support and care for the other person, but when we put ourselves first, that reaps carnage. That reaps destruction. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, and here's this word again, submissive. Respond wisely. Be considerate, be peace-loving, be submissive, full of mercy. Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since you are members of one body, you are called to peace." Remember that you and your spouse, if you're both believers, you are members of this body. And as such, we should deal with conflict and issues in our marriages, in our relationships with each other, with the goal of working towards peace. The goal of working towards peace. Why is it that we have all sorts of grace and consideration for people outside of our family relationships? Why is it that we're so kind and gracious in our response to people? But when it comes to our families, we're oftentimes the worst. I don't know why. I'm guilty of that too. When I say us, I mean me too. Good communicators also do this. They learn. They learn about the other person. Good communicators both disseminate information and acquire information. Listen, friends, one size does not fit all when it comes to your marriage. You can't look at how one marriage works and think that's how every marriage should operate. Paul says that we are no longer male or female, but one equally valued in Christ. Each person in a marriage has a value to contribute. Has a value to contribute. But each of our marriages is different and will operate different according to the uniqueness of the couple. How God has gifted them, wired them with their personalities. If you want your marriage to thrive, if you want to take it up another level, then each person in the relationship must be allowed to fully operate in their giftings. And to fully empower another person to use their gifts, you must spend the time and the energy to know that person. You must invest your life into that person. Who you're dating. There's a lot of great tools out there. One of the best tools that Jada and I have found is called the Myers-Briggs personality test. And so on the Myers-Briggs, I'm an ENTP. So if you're thinking Star Wars, I'm R2-D2, impersonal robot. Thank you for that. ENTPs tend to be, I'm going to just reveal some about who we are for you, right? So enjoy. Don't judge and don't use it as a weapon against us. Tends to be a workaholic. ENTPs tend to be workaholics. Gravitates towards anything complicated like marrying a southern girl. Or pastoring a church. Not as many laughs, huh? Speaking of marriage, let's see who I married. I married Jada, she's an ESTJ. I married Darth Vader, thank you. It's all fun and game. Jada is seriously not an evil Sith Lord, so please don't think that, right? Go to the next slide. This is probably more likely. Jada is actually probably Woody, more like Woody from Toy Story. And I'm more like Robin Hood, who likes to steal from the rich and give the poor. I'm an ENTP, this is me. Quick, innovative, curious, resourceful, excellent ability to understand concepts and apply logic, introspective and carefree, nonconformist, who is bored with routine. Okay, that's me, bored with routine. Jada is practical, realistic, organized, strategic, possesses natural leadership qualities, strict boundary setters, who takes personal responsibility very seriously, intensely focused on getting results, and seeks ways to do so. And this is what we'll fight over. This is great. This is what personality tests will do. They'll also tell you how you relate to each other. So ENTPs relate to ESTJs in this way. An ENTP, the highest priority for me is winning the debate. Doesn't that make for a great marriage? All I want to do is, I don't care if I'm right or wrong, I just want to win the debate. For Jada, the thing that we'll fight over most is she just wants to get the job done. Driving for closure is what they're built for. There's nothing bad in our personalities. There's nothing bad in how God wired us to be. We can operate in our personalities in unredeemed ways, right? But when we're operating in the newness of life that Christ has in us, and our redeemed people, as people redeemed by Him, we bring great benefit to one another. So know your spouse. Spend some time. It's fun. There's pages about who we are and how we relate to each other in just Myers-Briggs. And we read through these things and we laugh at each other. It's a lot of fun to get to know your spouse, your kids at a deeper level. Number 4, we have learned to press pause. We practice pressing pause. When there's a difficult circumstance, there's a difficult decision, and we can't agree on it, we press pause and we pray about it. We press pause and pray about it. Nothing bad has ever happened in our lives by pressing pause. But any time that either one of us has pushed our agenda, put our selfish ambitions as the forefront, operated out of envy, anytime we've pushed forward, destructive things have happened. We've pushed forward ahead. See, there's a reason God gave us spouses. Listen to what Proverbs 18:1 says. An unfriendly person pursues selfish ends. Some of us, when we're pursuing selfish ends in our marriages and making decisions, we are becoming unfriendly to our spouse. And against all sound judgments, we start to quarrel. Listen, God gave us a person in our marriage, in our lives, as wisdom, as sound judgment. And when we totally neglect that, when we don't together, when we disagree, when we don't together take that to prayer, almost always it ends in something destructive. That's been our experience. So we've learned to press pause. Number 5, we practice as a priority investing in the other person. You see, we look for ways to use the gifts God has given us to help the other person succeed. And by succeed, I mean to accomplish all that God has planned for them to accomplish with their lives. We take our gifts and we think, God has called you to do X, Y, and Z, and so I'm going to use my gifts to help you get there, to help you accomplish what God has called you to accomplish. And friends, that is as unique as who you are, as we are individuals, what God has called us to accomplish with our lives. 1 Thessalonians says this, Jesus died for us that whether we're awake or asleep, we may live together with Him. Therefore, encourage one another and build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. Many of you are building up the body of Christ, and many of you are building and encouraging up your spouses. But listen, we have a battle we live in. There is a battle. There are forces fighting against us. There are spiritual forces wanting to destroy our marriages, our relationships with God, our relationships with each other and our children. We are in a battle. We don't need any more enemies. So let's stop fighting each other. Let's stop fighting our spouses. Let's raise it up as a priority to invest in each other, to encourage one another, to use the gifts God has given us to build up our spouses and our children and our friends and out to the ends of the world. There's enough things against us. We don't need to be against ourselves. One way to encourage and to support is simply just to pray. Pray with your children. Pray with your spouse. Pray out loud with your spouse. For some of you, maybe it's been a long time since you've prayed together. And you just need to get back in the habit. How was your day? What are you worried about? What can I pray for you about? Number 6, we regularly relive our love story. We regularly relive our love story. We watch our wedding video. We think about. Jada will oftentimes go, tell me about what you were thinking when you flew down to the scene to tell me you love me. What was the words you said to me? You captivated my heart and consumed my thoughts. And I'm coming to see you. Relive your love story over and over again. We talk about the early days of our lives before we ruined it, before we ruined it by getting old, having children, going into debt with a house. Do you remember times when you ever ditched work or school just to hang out with your spouse? Can you go back and remember nobody ever did that? I actually quit a job. I had a weekend off school and I was like working 16 hours a week over the weekend with this. And I hated the job too, by the way. I paid like $6 an hour. It was crazy. And they're like, no, you can't have that weekend off. I'm like, this is not my life. You pay me $6 an hour, I quit. And I just got on an airplane and hung out with Jada for a weekend. We do crazy things in those early days of being in love. Go back to those days. Number 7, we daily practice the 60-second kiss. Now, I don't recommend this if you're not married because it charges you up a bit. So that's the whole thing in the Bible about, don't awaken love too early, right? So if you're not married, don't listen to me. But if you are married, every day, kiss for 60 seconds. It leads to all sorts of great things, more often than you're maybe it's happening right now. 60-second kiss. I'm not judging. I'm just thinking out loud without a filter. One of our favorite things to do is to torture our children. It's one of the great privileges of being a parent. And kissing in front of, inappropriate ways, kissing in front of your kids is a fun way to torture them. Song of Song, chapter 1, verse 2 says, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine." God created intimacy. It's a beautiful thing, experienced within the context of marriage. And so if you're married, enjoy it. If you're married, be as generous as you possibly can. I was talking to a friend of mine and just giving him some advice. I'm like, dude, you need to, first of all, just start telling your wife you love her. And then I'll try hugging her, without the intent of going someplace else. And then, why don't you practice this 60-second kiss thing? So he took me up on his advice, and he came back and he told me, he goes, yeah, so I went home and hugged my wife, told her I loved her, planted a 60-second kiss on her, and she began to weep. And she said, this is the worst day of my life. First of all, Mike got called to the principal's office, and secondly, we got a flat tire on the way to work, and now you come home drunk. Some of your spouses will think you've been drinking, friends. And maybe they need to think that. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So step it up. What are our next best steps here? I think this is it. This is what all of us need to make a step towards doing. Centering our lives, our marriages, our relationships around Christ. Center our lives, our marriages, our relationships on Christ. I love what Billy Graham says. Faith in Christ is the most important of all principles in the building of a happy marriage and a happy home. Faith. The most important thing we're talking about here today, friends, is your faith in Jesus. As you learn to love God and experience His divine love for you, you'll be able to love deeper in your relationships to one another. Friends, listen, it's never too late for your marriage. It's never too late for your relationships. It's never too late for God to heal you, to heal your spouse, to heal your marriage and your relationships. God still heals today. The same power that raised Christ from the dead is the power that lives in you and will resurrect your broken relationships. God is in the business of healing. Listen, we want to share with you one amazing story of God's redemptive work. Would you watch this video of Misty and Jason?
I'm Misty,
I'm Jason.
and this is our story.
All right, so we have been married for 15 years, and the first 10 of that, we were not walking with Christ.
You could say we coexisted with one another for 10 years. I've known God since I was 15, but didn't walk with him. And Jason didn't have any relationship at all. Around my 32nd birthday is when I hit rock bottom of this empty marriage. And it was a lot due to adultery throughout the 10 years. I hit a rock bottom, and I decided I wanted the divorce to happen. And upon doing so, I ended up ODing. And the Lord obviously had a different story for me. So coming back, the Lord put me into a complete 40-day fast. I didn't eat for 40 days, and I got on my face every day and prayed for his salvation before I left. I realized that God had excused me from our marriage after the affairs, but I never felt like God was telling me to actually leave him. And I come from a big family of divorce, so obviously that's not the path I wanted to go down. So during the 40 days of prayer, I would talk to Jason about God. I just started going to church with this girl that I had met who kind of reintroduced me into the church. And Jason fought it tooth and nail. He was not a very nice person. But to me, importance was his salvation, so I seek that with my heart. At the end of the 40 days, he caved. He gave his heart to the Lord. And it was so awesome because, like, the bonus of it was we got to keep our marriage. So it was the longest walk, but when you look back, it seems so small.
So the way I would sum it up, it was a battle of the spirit and the flesh. The spirit was always there. God was always leading me in the direction he was going to take me. And unfortunately, the flesh was winning. Throughout all of it, I always knew that I still loved Misty, and that was my goal, was to work things out and have the godly marriage. Once we started the healing process, we had somebody that God put into our lives help bring us toward him, and she did prayer. She prayed over our house. She took us to church. It was great, and I'm thankful to her for that.
Nobody be sad for us. We're happy we went through what we went through, because if we hadn't, we would have never come to Christ. And we could never tell anybody and share with them, so. Feel the same way? Yeah.
I feel that was our training to help those people who are going through the same thing and in need of that same type of help that we needed. God has prepared us for that.
Yep.
Jesus, we hear you calling, you asking. We hear you asking us to take a step towards you, towards healing. You are more than enough. God, give us the courage to come to you today, to confess the areas where our relationships are just a disaster. Our relationship with you, our relationship with our spouses or our friends or our family members, God. Our brokenness, we just lay it before you. Healer, Jehovah Rapha, come and heal us, your people. Restore our relationships, God. We bind the work of the enemy, fighting against marriages in this church, in your church globally. God, help us to call it what it is. Help us to turn towards you, to center our lives around you, to center our marriages on you. And God, bring the healing and the restoration that only you can bring. And God, help us. God, may this be a church that is known not by the number of divorces, but by the number of marriages that thrive and survive and extend the length of our lives. And we ask these things, Jesus.